Great. Welcome, everyone. It's Monday, May 8th, 2023. It's time for our regularly scheduled city council meeting. I ask the clerk to certify the meeting notice.
This meeting has been noticed in accordance with Idaho Code 74-204.
Clerk, call the roll, please.
Councilmember Heller,
Present.
Councilmember Jacobs,
Here.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Here.
Councilmember Page.
Here. Thanks. If you join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item is changes to the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I move that we move reposition item E5 from the consent agenda to position F5 on the action items.
Okay, you've got a motion. Do you have a second? Second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next item is the consent agenda, which would be items 1 through 4 and 6.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I move to approve the consent agenda items 1 through 4 and 6.
Second. Got a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hear none, with clerk call roll.
Councilmember Heller,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacobs,
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Abstain.
Councilmember Page.
Yes.
Thank you. We'll move down to F, special business. These are all action items. March 31st, 2023, second quarter financial review. This is in your packet. As you peruse that, feel free to contact Lisa if you have any particular questions, or me. Next item is to approve the appointment of Derek Hurd to the Garden City Urban Renewal Agency Board. Derek has joined us this evening. And thanks for bringing him, Danielle. I think most of us hopefully know a little bit about Derek. He has served on our design review committee while it was in force for how many years? Quite a few. 4 or 5 years. And as we've transitioned to design review as a function of our staff, he's one of our consultants that is able to help Jenna review design review applications. So I'm happy to present Derek to you as a board member to replace Jeff Souza on the Urban Renewal Board when his term expires at the end of June. So Derek's term will begin, if you approve him, on July 1st.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I unfortunately do not know Mr. Hurd. Would it be okay to ask him to stand and be acknowledged?
Sure.
It's very nice to meet you. Mr. Hurd, would you mind if I ask you a little bit about your background?
Derek, why don't you come up here so we can get you on the record? I didn't realize you didn't, or I would have elaborated a little more.
I've heard the name, of course.
We'll have to take you down to his business on 33rd.
33rd.
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead, council member.
If you don't mind just sharing some of your professional background.
Sure. So I'm a residential designer, master's in architecture from Montana State University. Been designing and drawing residential homes for my whole career since '99. I think we moved to Boise, and then purchased property in Garden City in 2015. And develop that into what we call Spaceport, which is an artist community. I have a furniture design studio there. My design practice is there. offices up front and then art studios in the back. There's maybe 12 different artists and studios in this complex on 33rd Street. And then have since purchased property across Chinden, which is what's now called the Commonwealth. It was the old Culligan building. And that is similar in that there's going to be many different artists in there and kind of an artist creative community across the street. And that is being developed and built out by one of our former tenants, an artist named Catherine Shaughnessy. So that's kind of a new creative, exciting adventure going on the other side of Chinden. And so, yeah, I've just been practicing design and doing a little development with my wife, Danielle, and kind of getting to know the Garden City community, having been a part of it since about 2015.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yep. Any further questions while we've got him up here? You didn't mention your furniture stuff. Well, you might as well mention it. since you're-
Yeah, and First Fridays are very active over in the east end of town in the Live Work Create district. And to back up and add some more content to that, when we were looking for a place for my furniture studio, it was specific. Our search was, we wanted to be in the Live Work Create district. We knew Cyril Mitchell, had tea in her backyard and hung out with her and now have her artwork hanging in our office. But our search for a furniture studio, we walk up and down every street in Garden City in 2014 and knocking on doors and saying, hey, we need a place. Is your warehouse available? And, eventually someone pointed to, check with those guys. I think they're retiring. And then eventually ended up purchasing the property that we did. That's now Spaceport. But the environment and the community and what we knew was going to become what it is now was very important for us in that search. And so First Fridays, June is the next First Friday. You're all welcome to come down and see the open studios, and there's usually 20 or 30 artists in the Live Work Create district that have open studios on First Friday. It's usually starting at about 5:30.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
did I interrupt you?
No.
I move to approve your appointment of Derek Hurd to Urban Renewal.
Second. Had a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Clerk, call the roll, please.
Councilmember Jacobs,
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Yes.
Councilmember Page,
Yes.
Councilmember Heller.
Yes. Great, thank you. And thank you, Derek, for being willing to serve. I think having some representation on that board from down on the east end of town is important. Next, we have a second one. It doesn't look like Crystal was able to be here with us tonight. Mary Jo Nyblad is also, her term ends at the end of June, and she is stepping off the board. Crystal Potter and her husband own Potter Wines, and they live in the Mystic Cove subdivision on the east end of town, and have, I was going to tell you for how long, but it's been quite a while, and very enthusiastic about being involved in helping the city. Staunch defender of the city. If you think we should be annexed by Boise, don't discuss it with her, because really has defended the unique character that every city has, and certainly Garden City has. And I'm sorry she isn't here for you to meet in person. I hope you'll act on her on the basis of my recommendation.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I've had the privilege of meeting Ms. Potter many times.
Oh,
And I will happily move to approve her to the Urban Renewal Agency Board.
I second.
yeah, I got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hear none, with the clerk call the roll.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Yes.
Councilmember Page,
Yes.
Councilmember Heller,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacobs.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. And um, your appointment is confirmed, so you don't have to stay for the rest of the meeting unless you just want to. But anyway, thanks again so much. Okay.
Thank you, Derek.
Okay, thank you. Next item F4. This is a reconsideration of SUB FY 2021-0010 Petra Point subdivision. Yes, sir. Looks like your legs healed up pretty good.
It's
Working. Okay,
doing 3 miles a day, every day.
good. Welcome. If you would, go ahead and give us your name and address for the record. And
My name is, thanks. My name is Craig Kolchak. My address is 4839 Mountain View Drive. I represent the owner of the development for Petra Point, located on 4900 Allworth Street. Request for reconsideration. We've submitted a redesign for the units. We went from a 2-story unit with a single car garage to 3-story with a tandem garage. The issue was parking. We needed a total of 21 parking spaces. With the tandem garage, we met the covered unit requirements within the comp plan, and we brought those parking spaces up to 23. So we're 2 above what we actually need. The site has remained the same. The landscaping remains the same. The only thing that changes was an additional 3rd story to the 2-story units. So we've met the requirements. There is a question of a will serve letter.
question on what?
A will serve letter from the Public Works. I contacted those guys and I submitted that in 2021. It was processed, but nothing came of it. And I've got copies of that I could give to Jenna.
Okay, well, when the staff comes up for their
Yeah.
report, I'll ask our Public Works Director.
So yeah, we've submitted the design review criteria to the planning group, and they've got everything they need to take a look at. My hope is that we get this reconsidered and approved.
Okay, thank you. Questions,
Mr.
Council?
Mayor.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Kolchak. I have a question.
Yeah.
What became, can you just refresh my memory? What became of the situation with the trash containers?
The last issue that we had was that we're moving that out to the street. In the last hearing that we had, the one question I had to Teresa was, what is the reason for denial? And the reason for denial solely was parking, and we addressed that. We're still planning on doing the parking on the parking street. There's no parking on Allworth. We're still planning on doing the trash on the street.
To Allworth.
Yeah.
Further questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
Mr. Kolchak, are you aware that Republic Services in the last month has denied access to parking to being able to put trash receptacles on the street?
With a recommendation of putting it on 49th Street.
Well, what they have said, if I read it correctly, we can hear from Stormborough is that they had a driver that was hit. And so they no longer are allowing trash receptacles.
Well,
on
yeah,
Allworth.
I
So you
did-
have to put it on 49.
Rochelle is the one that made that recommendation. I talked to Bill Pasteur this morning. He would be willing to do that. He's just not his first choice. Ultimately said it's the decision of the city of what they want.
Because in fact, I was asking Development Service about it too, because in the last hearing, you referenced a neighboring property that was putting their, I think you pointed to them saying, well, they're allowed to put it on. they have since been not allowed to put it on Allsworth. So I think Republic Services is moving towards, we don't want any receptacles on Allsworth. And so because it's a safety concern, because if they have, they prefer that not happen. So I guess my question is if that is a condition, is putting it on 49th
Yeah.
an acceptable?
Yeah. Whatever it takes. I just want this thing approved.
Well,
I mean, I think it's unfortunate that the owners of the property would have to take their trash receptacles a block away from their house. But if that's the only thing we can do, that we can't put a turnaround. And Bill and I talked about that today, and we talked about it. January 5th, 2022, where he approved the use of the trash receptacles on 49th Street.
Right.
There's no room on the property to put a turnaround without eliminating the landscaping requirements that's in the comp plan. And eliminating another unit, so that would be down to 6 units. So if we have to take the trash over to 49th Street, I'm good with that.
I used to understand the constraints, but I wanted to clarify that because Republic Service.
Yeah, you know, I find it kind of interesting that we had a letter from Republic Services that said, yeah, you can do that. And then in March, somebody called somebody at Republic Services to see if we could do that. And they said, well, yeah, it's not one of our favorite choices, but yeah, we could do that. And then they didn't like that one. So they called them again and talked to Rochelle on the 18th of April. And then got her to switch it around that it wasn't acceptable. So it went from approved in 2022 to reluctantly approved in 2023. And then finally somebody got somebody to say that it's not okay.
My understanding is they had an accident, one of the drivers was hit, and that prompted that.
There was a phone call made to the Republic Services. Okay, to see if it was okay after they got an okay from them on the 5th or the 8th of March. And somebody called them, and then Rochelle said, hey, we had somebody hit. And normally what happens is they've got the side units that pick them up off the side. Nobody gets out of the truck. I talked to Mr. Pastor this afternoon or this morning, and he said that they had a trouble with one of their trucks and they had a rear loaded one. And that's why the guy got hit. He think that I believe somebody was texting while they were driving, and that's what happened.
Yeah, that's not good. All right. Thank
So,
you.
yeah, no worries.
Any further questions? Yeah. Okay, thank you, sir.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. While we're waiting for this to load, just a little bit of a background, I think has been discussed already on this application and by Mr. Kolchak, is that yes, this application was previously denied, and then there was a request for reconsideration. And then there was a request for additional time to supply the application materials to address the parking, as Mr. Kolchak had identified. And the changes that have been made to the application do result in a decrease of lots from 12 to 10, resulting in 2 common lots and 8 residential lots. An increase of the height of the units, tandem parking garages, which does remove the need for the previously requested parking waiver. Architectural design changes due to the new unit type, an increase in open space, and then the changes do currently show non-compliance with some conditions requested by the design review committee. That include 3 bicycle parking spaces, pedestrian connection from the pathway to the common area, as well as a screening component to shield the headlights. And I will look for an image very quickly to show you what that means. And so there is a proposed pathway that runs along here. But there had been a request by the design review to connect the units to that pathway, as well as this access drive it does shine into the adjacent property. And so screening the headlights right there is basically what I'm just noting. There's also a those are not currently in the draft conditions of approval. The staff report that is in your packet that Ms. Beal with the Development Services Department reviewed the changes and noted. And this starts on page 72, so it would be on 73. Her analysis of code does go through each section of code, and she notes some non-compliances. However, those are conditioned in the draft decision document. And so the non-compliance with a permanent path that connects to the public sidewalk, for example, is conditioned in number 6B of the draft conditions of approval. The landscaping, it was unknown because the land and revised landscaping plan was not provided. That's conditioned in number 6C and E. Open space provisions, again, it's unknown, just lack of documentation. And that's conditioned in number 7. And then as Mr. Kolchak had pointed out, in the original decision, the 2 items of concern were both parking as well as a refuse. Garden City's code does not address how to handle specifically refuse. And so it doesn't specify if it needs to be on site, off site, et cetera, within the development code. And so Mr. Kolchak is correct that the crux of the denial, it did really point towards parking at that point in time. However, no coercion by staff. There was a phone call to Republic Services on April 19th with Rochelle Klein, and Ms. Klein did note that that they would not be allowing any additional services on Adams and Allworth. And there are a couple of items there, as Councilmember Jacobs had pointed out, previous application had been serviced off of Allworth Street, Adams Allworth Street, and was creating some issues, and it had been specified to not have those services on site, as well as she noted concerns for safety for the individuals picking up the refuse, as she had indicated to staff that they had a recent accident. And so on collector roads, they're hoping not to, or not hoping, they're not allowing, for her words, any additional services. And so there is a condition, it's the first condition in the draft conditions of approval, that it would require a plan with public services, either to pick up internally, which would be quite difficult with this site plan as currently drawn, or to relocate that to 49th Street. If it is relocated to 49th Street, there is a condition that staff would recommend be added, and that be some sort of notification to the property owners that refuse would not be picked up off of Allworth. So in the CCNRs would be the one spot that staff would suggest might be appropriate, a requirement that notification be within the CCNRs. And then the will serve item that Mr. Kolchak brought up. It looks like it's been in the record for a long time, as that application material has not been provided, and there is a condition of approval that a will serve letter would be required. And what that will serve letter is essentially stating that the city has the capacity for water and sewer for the property. And if that's not there, then the applicant would be required to bring that water and sewer to site. But it is conditioned in the draft conditions of approval. And so to refresh, the items that are in your packet in the analysis that show is not compliant with code there are draft conditions, and they're highlighted within the potential draft decision document. And what the ones that Ms. Beal did not include were the 3 bicycle parking spaces that Design Review Committee had originally requested. And then the screening component at the to the adjacent property. And then there is the pedestrian connection that is, there's a draft condition. And then the other would be some sort of notification to future owners that they would not be able to utilize Allworth unless approved by Republic Services on street. However, there is a condition that would require approval by Republic Services for the plan.
Okay, questions of staff?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
Mr. Thornborough, this may seem a little bit odd, but didn't we recently approve another development with similar color schemes in very close proximity to this?
Mayor, Councilmember Jorgensen, off the top of my head, I do not remember, not to say that there wouldn't be very similar color schemes, and that this is a pretty neutral palette that's not dissimilar from what we'll often see. So I do apologize. I don't remember exactly if the city has recently approved something nearby or not.
But my concern is, I don't think we want the look of gray and beige down the corridor of Adams. So I think I would like to verify that. Possible. And then Ms. Thornborough, I want to make sure I understand, and I apologize for asking you to pull up the diagram one more time. The disconnect for the pedestrian access. So I think it was that diagram. Jen.
Mayor, Councilmember Jorgensen, I was trying to find one that does a
Oh.
little better job than this.
Okay.
So this is Allworth Street.
Mhm,
And then there's a greenbelt connection that runs adjacent to the property.
mhm.
And there had been a request to connect through the common area into that greenbelt connection.
Gotcha.
And it's not reflected in any of the new materials.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Okay. Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
The Starbrook, I kind of want to clarify the Republic Services issue, because we have kind of contradictory statements.
Mhm.
And so what you're saying is they're not allowing it. And then we have a letter from Bill Pastor says they prefer not to allow it. So is your recommendation, then the way I understand it, written currently as a condition, is that trash not be placed in Allsworth, and that residents would have to park their containers 249?
Mayor, Councilmember Jacobs, currently the draft yes, So we did receive a letter from Mr. Pastor in March 23rd. Noting that there isn't enough room for the truck to turn around inside the property. And it would have to be brought out to Allworth, but they would prefer to avoid that. And then there was a subsequent phone call on April 19th that did contradict the ability to have it on Allworth Street. That would require that some other mechanism be identified. And so the current draft condition of approval says provide a plan approved by Republic Services for where refuse can be picked up either on site or from a street other than Allworth Street.
So that's a Republic Services requirement.
Per the phone conversation with Ms. Klein. And then the city does not have a secondary in writing documentation from Republic Services indicating that they would not. That was a verbal phone call with staff.
Could we get that in writing from them?
We certainly could. Or the city could also amend that condition number 1 to be a plan approved by Republic Services and just take the from a street other than Allworth off. And then that would be something for the applicant to continue to work through with Republic Services.
I think that's a better way to go, frankly, than since we don't have a specific requirement in our code. Just making sure that the applicant knows they're at the mercy of Republic Services on where the trash gets picked up. So we're not telling Republic Services what to do. So the applicant's gonna have to work that out with Republic Services, the way Jenna's got it written, correct?
Mayor, thank you. The condition would need to be slightly truncated to just say provide a plan approved by Republic Services for where the refuse can be picked up. And then staff still would suggest that note of a secondary condition of approval that if it's not allowed to be picked up on Allworth, that somehow the future buyers are aware of that so that there isn't a latent problem for when they sign up for services.
Great, thank you. What I don't recommend we do is tell Republic Services how to do their business. So that's why the applicant's gonna have to work that out with Republic Services.
Get an approval.
Well, yeah, if they decide not to pick up trash on Allworth, the city isn't going to require them to pick it up. They just won't pick it up. And then I would recommend that they have an alternate option there if it's 49th, but and that's something, if we think we need to address that in our code, we can look at that as we embark down the path of code revisions, but I don't want to get out ahead of our code.
Mr. Mayor, may I
Yes.
ask, Ms. Thornbow, could you read again the amended language for the condition as you understand it ought to be?
Certainly, Mayor, Councilmember Heller, that condition number 1 on prior to approval of
What page are you
construction
on?
plan.
So everybody can make sure we're looking at it.
That is on page 23 of the draft decision, which will be
Page 99 of the packet.
99, okay.
thank you very much, Council President. Staff would suggest that be revised to state, provide a plan approved by Republic Services for where refuse can be picked up, period. And then strike the rest of the sentence.
Further questions of staff?
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
Mr. Kolchak, do you have any final remarks before I? Okay.
Mayor, this
Oh.
is a public, it has been noticed as a
Oh, it
public
has,
hearing.
oh, okay, I didn't
Thank
have
you.
that on my agenda. Okay, this is a public hearing. We'll go ahead and open the public hearing at this time. That's signups on parking. Do we have anyone signed up to testify? Not, this is not the parking. This is the Petra Point. Okay, no one has signed up to testify. I don't see anyone online using the hold their hand up. Okay. Let the record reflect that there's been no one is here to testify. Mr. Kolchak, would you like to close out?
On the Republic Services thing. I know that the city said that they're not going to tell Republic Service what to do. But in talking with Republic Services, William Pastor, who's on the board for do their thing, said that they'll do whatever the city recommends they do.
Well,
And I know you don't want to tell them their business, but I'm getting kind of some.
we don't have a code we don't have a code to
Right.
rest upon. So the city getting in the business of telling somebody that's outside our code, I think is an area that we want to avoid. So if it was in our code, we'd be happy to do that. So I'm not going to budge on that one.
I
Okay.
totally understand. Totally
Okay.
understand. As far as the connectivity to the bike path, we've got a plan that's showing the connectivity to the bike path. The landscaping plan that Jenna showed was an architectural rendition, not the planned rendition of the landscaping. She mentioned a screened area at the end of the driveway. There is a screened area at the end of the driveway in our design. Let's see what else. The three bike racks are shown in our landscaping plan. I don't have a problem with that at all.
Okay.
The recommendations from staff, I'm totally fine with.
Okay.
The only issue that I've got right now is the dimensional requirements for the bike path that we have. Staff has recommended a 10-foot bike path with a 12-foot easement. And we're taking that 10-foot bike path with a 12-foot easement into a 7-foot bike path with a 10-foot easement on the property to the north of us. They were only required to do apparently 7-foot wide bike path. Part of the deal with my negotiations with the neighbors to the west was to acquire an easement that will be recorded once this thing is approved. A 5-foot easement on his property so that I could keep from having a 2-foot backyard in the westernly units. So I've got 5 foot on our side and 5 foot on his side to accommodate the 10-foot sidewalk. It just seems a little odd that the neighbors to the north have a 7-foot bike path and a 10-foot easement. And the 10-foot easement on, or the 10-foot sidewalk on our property is a constraint on the design that we have to accommodate that design. If we could come to an agreement with a smaller bike path that would match the existing sidewalk that's already been poured to the north, that would be pretty cool. But other than that, I totally get what Jenna was saying, and I'm totally down with it.
Okay. Questions, anybody?
Mr. Kolchak,
Yes, ma'am.
you're not proposing at this late date or requesting a waiver for the bike path, are you?
No, we'll put the bike path in. That's not an issue. I just find it a little odd that we're doing a 12-foot easement with a 10-foot bike path that goes into a 10-foot easement with a 7-foot bike path. And the constraints on the design that we have, it works because I did the 5-foot easement agreement with the property to the north, to the west, I mean. But it just seems a little odd that we've got 10 feet going into 7 feet and 10 at a 12-foot easement going into a 10-foot easement. It just doesn't blend, I guess. But I'll put a 10-foot walkway if that's what's required. But I just think that for continuity's sake and for aesthetics, it might be better to have both bike paths the same. Just a thought.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Anything further? Okay, thank you, sir.
You bet.
Okay, with that, we'll close the public hearing on SUV FY 2021-0001.
Oh, Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
I apologize. Mr. Kolchak, would you mind?
I need to recall you, Mr. Kolchak, if you would go back up. Okay. Just a minute. I've got to be technical about this. I'm going to reopen the hearing to allow Mr. Kolchak to respond to Councilmember Jorgensen's question. So please go ahead.
I apologize.
No, that's all right.
Mr. Kolchak, if in fact we do research and find that there's another development with similar color scheme, would you be amenable to changing?
Color, smeller, whatever it takes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
You bet.
With that, now we will once again close the public hearing on SUV FY 2021-0010. Council, the matter is properly before you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
first of all, I want to acknowledge written comments from the public in opposition. There were a couple statements in written opposition that gave me pause. And so from the dais, I wanted to acknowledge these comments and for my own personal benefit, share that I believe that council members spend hours and hours preparing to be very well informed regarding issues that come before the council. And that I have never, ever in 2.5 years that I've been sitting on the council, been aware of a decision that was foregone or made 1.5 years before it came before the council. I think that this council, each of us are deliberate and thoughtful in reviewing the materials that are provided to us and consult with our city's attorney and development staff and other staff of the city when necessary. So I simply wanted to state that and to provide assurance to the community that, again, as far as I'm aware, since I've been sitting on the council, there's been no foregone conclusion regarding any application that has come before the council or code modification, that there's healthy deliberation and consideration. So having said all of that, this application has been a challenge. It is certainly raised some eyebrows over the course of the application, and I'm certain this applicant would testify to the fact that this was not a foregone conclusion for approval. The lack of documentation has been somewhat concerning to me over the process. I do still have some concerns regarding the documentation, and I really encourage Mr. Kolchak, you and your team to pay particularly close attention to the documentation. I understand the concerns regarding the trash services. That's been a concern since the original application. To the staff point and Mr. Mayor's point, we don't have code that would prevent this. And this council also is very considerate of complying with legal applications. And therefore, I don't believe legally that this could be denied based on the public services comments. I do believe that that's something that will be accommodated through language of conditional approval. But that needs to be an arrangement that is identified between Republic Services and then disclosed to future buyers. As long as the documentation is provided and that we find compliance to the condition of the three bicycle spaces, the pedestrian connection, and the screening for the headlights, I would move to approve this application. And I also want to thank the applicant for reconsidering the design to accommodate parking.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to approve as articulated by Council Member Jorgensen. Is there any consideration for matching the easement and bike path widths?
Mr. Mayor. I think we ought to move to kind of to Mr. Kolchak's point, to match that, so we don't have a 10-foot going right into a 7-foot. If there's any, maybe Mrs. Norwood has a reason why we shouldn't do that. I guess I would move that we would allow that to be fluid, so to speak, with the neighboring to the north.
Well, okay, technically, you can make a substitute motion adding to the motion that was already made, or if the maker of the original motion will amend her motion if she chose to, she may not, then we can go that direction. So I'll ask, first of all, so we're talking about the section of the bike path between Allworth and just along the side of the property to the path that's already built on the north.
And I'd be interested to hear what the other council members have to say on it. That's just my perspective.
Okay, we're in the discussion on the original motion. So any thoughts on that?
Mr. Mayor, I think that's reasonable flexibility, in my opinion.
I also agree that it seems like a path that unnecessarily and curiously narrows a couple feet. That's not good optics. Of course, we prefer wider paths, but where one's already established, I think matching it's definitely acceptable.
Okay, Council Member Jorgensen, do you want to amend your motion or stick with your original motion?
Mr. Mayor, may we ask staff, is there any reason not to make the modification?
Mayor, Councilmember Jorgensen, if there is a different requirement on the adjacent property, staff would suggest at least should taper, if not match, just because if you dead end the concrete, you would have a safety concern where you would do that. I believe where that comes from is there is a code requirement for bicycle and pedestrian pathways to be 10 feet as a minimum, and that's likely where that came from without if there was a different requirement on the adjacent property. But certainly if you amend that to match whatever the requirements of the adjacent property, staff doesn't see an immediate issue in that it's not going to be as busy as, say, the green belt, for example.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
I would amend my motion
Okay.
to allow for continuity in the bike path.
okay,
Need a second to that?
yes, I need a second to
I'll
agree.
second that.
Okay. We're good to go now. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk call the roll.
Councilmember Page,
Yes.
Councilmember Heller.
Yes.
Councilmember Jacobs,
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is the decision document approval for DSR FY 2023-0001 and CUP FY 2023-0002. This is the Crown Castle issue. Mr. Wadums, are you going to brief us on this or is Ms. Thornborough?
I think Ms. Thornborough is going to brief you.
Okay.
The one thing I can say about it while she's walking up is that, as it's currently written, it says that, Councilmember Jorgensen concurs. I'm recommending that that be stricken because she was not present for the public hearing. And then I think, Jenna has one other strike through that she's going to recommend, or
Okay.
a couple of different strike throughs. she's
Okay.
gonna recommend.
Mayor, members of the council, sorry for my tardiness getting up here. Mr. Wadums is correct. There is a recommended strike through as Councilmember Jorgensen was not present.
Can we go to a page number?
And that is the very last page of the draft opinion. Which. Oops.
Going to be on page 57. in
So
your
it started
packet.
on, yeah.
57.
Okay.
And here you can see just right at the bottom. That it notes that she concurs, although she was not present to concur. As well as site specific condition number 2.
Okay.
Pages.
And that is on page 55. Where there's reference to previous approvals. Staff is recommending based on the appellant's request to just strike that in its entirety.
Okay.
And with that, I stand for
Any
questions.
questions? So it's just cleaning this up a little bit. Yeah. Okay. Okay. The action would be to approve the decision document for those 2 items that I would recommend you name by number and as amended by staff.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, sorry for the late point of order, but the other thing is we want to make it real clear that this decision is going to be, the date's going to be today, not 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
So for due process purposes, everybody's on notice that the clock starts on May 8th, not April 24th.
Okay, very good. Okay, what's the pleasure of the council?
Mr. Mayor, was that specific condition number 2?
Yes, it would, no, it was specific, specific requirements on page 55. Item number 2 would be stricken.
Last line of it.
And then on page 56. I'm sorry, on page 57. The very last, just above my signature there, it has all your names and indicates concur. We just need to remove Councilmember Jorgensen since she wasn't here.
How would you like to handle that with the date being today and Councilmember Jorgensen being here today?
Mayor, Council President Page, my recommendation is just to strike her name from this opinion. I don't think she can concur when she didn't sit through the hearing. So and then keep the date being May 8th for the decision document. So I don't know if she wants to just formally recuse herself from this, or if we just want to do a strike through, but I don't think she wants her name on this since she did not consider it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
one more second, please. I move for the approval of decision document DSR FY 2023-0001 and CUP FY 2023-0002. Striking on page 55. Number 2, site-specific requirement number 2 at the bottom of page 55. And then on page 57, striking Teresa Jorgensen's name from the proceeding, and that this approval be effective as of today's date.
Okay, thank you. Just so we don't confuse anything, the specific application specific requirement number 2 is not at the bottom of page 55. It's near the top. Huh? Oh, I'm looking at this. Oh, we've got 2 different 55s. Okay, I'm looking at the same thing somewhere. Okay, I stand corrected. Thank you. Got a motion before the council. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
And a second? Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all, let's see, clerk call roll, please.
Councilmember Heller,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacobs.
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Abstain.
Councilmember Page.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now we move to section G, ordinances, resolutions, and contracts. This is a public hearing for CPA FY 2022-0006 regarding changes to the city's parking regulations. Ms. Thornborough?
Mayor, members of the council, thank you. I did want to start off tonight by noting that there are no current drafted changes from the last time that the city council reviewed this document. However, there have been some comments since the staff report went out in the city council packet. And to briefly go over what some of those comments entail. There have been some internal staff comments. First, really looking at the permit issuance. And so staff would suggest just a simple clarification that the clerk issues the permits at some point in time in future should permitting take place. That city-owned vehicles be exempt from permit requirements. And some slight rewarding of a couple of sections. And so loading zones is one such section where loading zone perhaps can be defined. And there's a provision within the property maintenance section that loading zones only adjacent to or within 50 feet of residential areas not be operated during certain hours, and perhaps adding the word outside of an enclosed space to that provision, as well as reiterating in the development code. So as properties develop, that loading zones be developed in such a way to not impede vehicular or any type of travel. Right now, that's currently only in the property maintenance. In the staff report that you had for tonight, there was some discussion about relocating the tandem parking section. And the reason that originally tandem parking found itself into the calculation section based on a suggestion that the city limit tandem parking towards required parking, but through the iterations of the drafts, that was taken back out for residential. And so a better construction may be to relocate that as a restriction within non-residential mixed use and multifamily. And then just some slight rewording to the lighting criteria to better clarify that the intent is to decrease light trespass on adjacent properties and increase security and safety on properties. And better reword proposed 84D8 to keep the intent, but make it clear what the intent is. And one other item of note is Garden City Code 514 does give the police department or the chief of police and designees the ability to cite parking violations. However, it's noted, should the city want to open that up a little bit, other codes such as Boise and Meridian further specify that code enforcement, community service officers, et cetera, can cite, but certainly the chief could create policies identifying who his or her designee would be. And then also today, each of you has this in front of you. There was a late submittal that you could consider tonight. And that's from Miss Butler with Butler Spink. And she's provided 5 points, noting the first two, I think, are just clarification. I don't think that she's suggesting any changes to code, just making note. The third is just a missing strike through where the proposed code should state 4, not 34, where the strike through on 3 wasn't showing up. And then she's requesting that there be a reduction in bicycle parking spaces, and noting that perhaps she believed that there was a typo requiring guest bike parking spaces, but I do not believe that to be a typo. And then also requesting that there be consideration for reductions in parking adjacent to transit lines. And with that, it is a public hearing tonight, and I stand for any questions that the council may have.
Okay, questions? Okay, there may be some later, so we'll see.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I have a sign up from Art Peavy. He does not wish to testify. He wishes to be included as an interested party. He didn't indicate support, opposition, or neutral. Deb Rydell. Yes, ma'am. Would you like to testify? Okay, thank you. She is opposed. The note says it needs more work. Okay. Clarice Schmelik. Okay, I don't know if I butchered that too badly. Pretty close. Okay. Okay.
Oh. Like it.
All right.
And good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council.
Give us your name and address for the record.
My name is Clarice Schmelik. I live at 6253 North Fair Oaks Place and Garden City 83703.
Thank you.
And thanks for the opportunity to just revisit this issue. It sounds like there's been some good work done to try to make the parking code work for a variety of people. But my concern is that there's still more work that needs to be done. The reason I say that is that currently the parking ordinance doesn't work for all types of vehicles. I know Jenna testified last time about the different kinds of cars. I just looked up on the DMV records. Almost 71% of vehicles in Idaho that are registered are SUVs and trucks. So which means that they stick out further, they take up more space, And people have lots of toys that goes into those. And so considering that as an important development concern, that you have space for those when you're developing property. The second thing is that it doesn't necessarily address the needs of contiguous neighborhoods. And I know we talked last time that making handicapped people or elderly people walk a quarter mile to get to parking spaces was not really taking into consideration, multiple children, bags, et cetera. We just need to think about the variety of population that we have here. And, as an example of this, look right across the street on the same spot, right along State Street, in Boise, where they have 17 units that have been completed of townhomes with one parking space for those 2-bedroom units and two parking spaces for the 3-bedroom units. There's 7 to 8 cars on the street every night that are spillover parking. So our concern is that if you don't allow enough and put it in the plan to begin with, you're going to have a lot of cars that go on the street because we like to drive our cars, and and I think you mentioned last time, Mayor, that Idaho is one of only 2 states that doesn't really support our bus system. So while we on the one hand say, let's encourage people to do carpooling, bus travel, riding bikes, it's kind of hard to force people to do that. And so in the meantime, how do we consider that? So my recommendation is we go back and do some more work and make it even better than it is now.
Great. Thank you. Any
Thank you.
questions, council?
Yes, Mr.
Great.
Mayor.
Yes.
Ms.
Did
Schnell,
you have a question?
can you answer a question?
You're too quick.
Thank you for coming back. Because I just clarify, I might have misheard. Did you say 71%?
It's 70.8%
70
is
point.
trucks and SUVs, the combination.
Okay. Any other questions, council?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
And I would like to clarify, can you tell me specifically, you mentioned a development on State Street?
Right, at the corner of Carlsbad Way. And so it's right by Pierce Park and the Idaho Central Credit Union. There are currently 77 units going to be in that piece of property that's next to Hendricks Veterinary. And so only 17 of them have been completed. And with just those 17, this is what we see on the street every day. We have a family member who lives on that street. And so they're lining up. So we were just kind of playing with that the other day on our little cul-de-sac and going, okay, you've got your 4 cars, you've got your 2 cars, you've got your 3 cars. We put them on the street and go, okay, how does anybody get by? Because they're really not designed for parking on both sides and traffic going 2-way along there. It becomes very crowded. Many of the streets are just in existing neighborhoods or not designed with the intention of having that kind of traffic and parking.
Anything further? Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Since we have our system working tonight, Mr. May?
Yes, how are you, everyone? Thank you so much for having me again. Let me see if I can, you might want to see me. I don't look very presentable tonight, but anyway. I just wanted to talk about tandem parking briefly, hoping that it can be allowed for, obviously, I think it's being allowed right now for single family homes and townhomes. However, if you have a single owner apartment, I don't really see the difference beyond maybe what you call it. I'm calling it an apartment versus I'm calling it a townhome. As long as those tandem spaces are owned and controlled by a single owner, I really hope that you would allow tandem parking to be permitted in that situation. And that's all I had to say. Thank you so much.
Quite welcome. Thank you, Mr. May. Any questions, council? Okay. Hang on, I'm getting notes. Mr. Patterson. Mr. Patterson signed up ahead of time. And Lisa, did he submit the paperwork representing how many?
It was 5 people, I believe. Jenna has the paperwork there.
Five, okay. For anyone who's not understanding what I'm talking about, if several people get together and choose one spokesperson, we have a form you can fill out in which the people who want to be represented put down their name, address, and their signature. And then a spokesperson can speak for those. Those that are being spoken, those that are being represented by the spokesperson are giving up their right to testify and vesting that in the spokesperson. And the maximum time that a spokesperson can consume in representing others is 15 minutes. So you understand that, Mr. Patterson?
I got my ears off, like I heard it. I got it.
You're good to go. So if you would, give us your name and address for the record, and after that, I'll start the timer. Thank you.
I'm David Patterson. And I live at 6326 North Charleston Place in Garden City here. And I want to thank you for listening to me tonight. I have faith that we're all after the same thing. We all want Garden City to be a great place to live. When I was in the 8th grade at South Union High School, Bob Donnelly was my teacher, and he was also my football coach. And there was a question on the test they asked, what is our surroundings? And I thought, world, how's that? Pretty good, isn't it? Wrong answer. Environment was the right answer. And he never let me forget it either at the football game. Anyway, it came down again that the environment includes parking and the ability to get a parking space in a reasonable amount of time and not drive around the park forever to do it. So I understand development, and I understand that they want to make as much money as possible. There's no question in my mind that that's one of the major goals that they have. Especially corporations, they don't have a soul, they're an entity. Anyway, in my older age, I've gotten more religious than I was before because I'm going to transition. I called it dying before, now I call it transitioning, which is a nice way to say it. Anyway, I think there's 7 words that are very wise. They say, seek, knock, ask, and it will be given. So I didn't know much about parking codes. I'm a pretty good golfer. I'm good at that, not parking codes. So what I did is I got on DuckDuckGo, a search engine, and I put in parking codes and I put in parking ordinances. And a whole bushel basket of answers came up. So I sifted through all of them and looked at probably 20. And one that jumped in my attention was in 2018, there was an international parking code. Well, who would know? International, that's worldwide, right? That's world class, I would say, right? International, world class. So one of the things that Councilman Page said one day when we were in a meeting, he said, let's keep it simple. Let's simplify this way down to nothing. The KISS theory, keep it simple, stupid. And so as I've moved through my life, I've learned things, and I've learned that what we need to do is communicate what we feel is right to do. And what I want to see in Garden City, I don't care about making money anymore. I've made all my money in the world. But I want to see Garden City be world class. I think we all have the same idea, right? The opposite of world class is terrible class, I guess. I don't know. Unworld class, out of world class. But I want to be world class. I think you agree with that. And we think that our citizens, we're an island of 12,900 people surrounded by Boise and all the other big towns around. And we're like a diamond in the rough right here. We have a river running through us. We have all the benefits of being in Boise, of being in a big town. We have a river that runs through us, but yet we can run our own little show over here. We can be world-class on our side and let the people in Boise that across State Street do their thing over there. That's their choice to do it. But let's be world-class. What do you think? You like that idea? Is that a good idea? The answer is yes. Come on, guys, give me a nod. Okay, anyway, so. What I found on the internet is the code for world-class parking. In fact, there's a code for world-class everything. May I pass it out?
Sure.
This is a screenshot, but you have to forgive me for.
Just mark it as an exhibit.
Screenshot.
Thank you.
That's all right. I'll take it.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. Thank you. Yeah, anyone wants? There. The next one. Here today. Okay, so I give all mine away. I don't have a world class.
You need us to give you one back?
Someone give me a world class one back.
Yep, Jenna's got one.
Yeah. Okay, so keep it simple, stupid. You can read through this thing in about 5 minutes. The thing I want to focus on is the numbers, so. Let me run my, how am I doing here? Okay, the Garden City Parking Code by the numbers. And what I'd like to do. I've always believed in notes. So I'm gonna let you guys put a positive or negative, make notes on this presentation as I go. And have them vote and just say, "Ooh."
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson.
Okay, so let's go through it one at a time. Okay, the other thing I did. Was, yeah, and I made copies of your. This is the current draft. Of what the numbers are for Garden City.
Let me have those, so you're not burning your time up doing this.
That's okay. Gonna burn some. Here. Okay, so I'm gonna try to make this a work session. So let's go through these one at a time. The first thing is dwelling parking. On the world class. It's two places per dwelling, no visitor, no nothing. You can read it there really easy. The second line down is two parking spaces per dwelling, period. End of story. There is some additional things in there, get 4 or 5 bedrooms, so there's an additional parking deal, but I didn't think that was very appropriate. I didn't worry about that one. So what I did. Let me pass these down. This is the Garden City proposal, and I put it on a spreadsheet. I don't even have one, because this is. How many you got there? You got enough? Did you get something up here? All right. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, and here it is.
Here's an extra one. Anderson.
Okay, good. Okay, here it is. Same spreadsheet, same numbers. On the international zoning code for parking. Going side by side, you notice on the the one that we're proposing with the guest parking, I put that on there also, there's a guest parking, oh, it's not on. It's not on the world class. Maybe each of those, I did. I'm not doing very good at passing.
I think you're doing great.
I'm not really a pass around. I'm pretty good. Thank you.
Mr. Patterson, you're making me nervous about using your time up without talking to us. So come on up here and talk to us and they can pick that up later.
Okay. How am I doing on time? Where am I at?
You're at you're 9.5 minutes in.
Hey, I'm doing good so far. I'm less than 10. That's good. Okay, so everyone has two eyes and can read. You don't have me to read this to you. This is not the first grade anymore. But if you look at let's go right to the bottom line. Why not? On the Garden City proposed parking code, which Jenna, I'm not, this is not anything to do with you or this is trying to be.
Talk to us,
Good.
Mr. Patterson.
Okay, this is trying to be being right, not right. Okay, on the international code, you can see what I did, gross square feet. You can read, everyone can read that, right?
Uh-huh.
The bottom line on the international code is 1,625.7 with these assumptions, parking spaces. On the I don't have any of what is it on the
1,000.
Proposed.
2.3.
okay. Now, I'm not gonna go all this, we don't have time to do this, but you know, I tried really hard. There's a couple things I want to talk about. In the proposal, the only one I know about is the plantation subdivision proposal. They proposed food trucks. How many spaces does a food truck take when you have a food truck on a Saturday afternoon? How many people from out of town are going to come look at the food truck? You know, they tried to put a food truck down where Tate's Reynolds used to be, and it wasn't a big enough area for them down there. Anyway, where I'm from in Arizona, they have food trucks quite a bit, and they take 3 parking spaces up. They park sideways, 3 spaces up. So that should be taken into consideration. If they propose to have food trucks there, you got to have parking for them. Ice cream shop, I called that a restaurant. Coffee shop, I called that a restaurant also. Yoga club, I called that an assembly. Art in the park, I called that an assembly. You can see what I did with my documentation there. Farmers market. How do you put, if you're gonna have a farmer's market, how do you take space for that? How much space does a farmer's market take? Because you gotta have the people have the farmer produce, and then you gotta have the people parking to come get the farmer's produce. And if it's well advertised, it's a big deal. Also, live music is a big deal if it's well advertised or advertised at all. So how many parking spaces are you gonna have on visitors for that? I'm running out of time here, so we're gonna move right along. Walking path, snow storage. Now, snow storage is not on the international thing, but I have a 3-car garage and I got a driveway, 3 cars. I shovel both sides to my driveway. I really take probably a half a parking space on one side and a half parking space on the other side. And sometimes it gets up this high when I throw the dirt, the soap there. So that snow's got to go somewhere because you gotta.
Stay over by the microphone, please, so I can get you on.
That snow's got to go somewhere. I'm a real good talker, aren't I?
Huh? You are.
Quack, quack, quack. Here I am. Anyway, so there's been nothing said about snow storage or snow removal. If they're going to remove it, they're going to have a big old machine out there to remove it. usually all the stores in town just move it to the side, right? Move it to a couple parking spaces. Well, if you got 1,400 parking spaces, how much space is that going to take to put that snow? And how high are you going to pile it? And I guess what loader are you going to use? Okay, so the point I'm making is that this plexiglass drives me crazy. I see my reflection in it.
I'm sorry.
I'm not very good looking, I know that. Anyway, it's impossible to solve this problem after the concrete's poured. If you have extra parking spaces, you can put a restaurant or a coffee drive-through shop there or something, but you can't add to it unless you do 2 stories high. Maybe they have anti-gravity cars. How does that sound? We've got anti-gravity cars, park them on top of each other. Anyway, this is a really important decision that you're making, because this is a lifelong decision. Okay, now, whoa. I'm doing good here. Whoa, stop. Gentle, 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 gentle. Okay, so the international code had, how many parking spaces did our spreadsheet have on it? 1,600, right? And the proposed parking with the 1.6 cars per, that's the big one right there, the 1.6 cars per dwelling. That 0.6 cars are hard to drive around though. That guy's hard to drive. So anyway, you can put down, it's what was the code? Look at this. ACHD recommended 1,500 spaces in their documentations for this thing. LPC Inc. recommended 1,100 spaces. Where are the 400 cars going to go? What is our solution on this?
Okay.
Am I done?
I understand the point and I really appreciate this, but we're starting to slip into an application that's not before the council right now. So.
Well, I'm just saying, this is the only example that I know. That's my example. It's not, I'm not down on LPC, but I'm saying that that's the only one that I know about. So that's the one I got to use.
I understand that, and you've given us a lot of good data, but I got to be really careful about using something, an application that's not before the council, to use as a basis for an analogy. That's tough. I'm not.
Yes.
Let me tell you what's going to happen. I'm going to have you wrap this up. This is a public hearing tonight. We're going to have a second reading of the ordinance. It takes 3 readings, so the council's going to have an opportunity to absorb this information before we come back for the 3rd reading. And if there's any modifications based on your testimony or any other testimony we have had, then that can be incorporated at the 3rd reading. Okay, so we're not passing or not passing this tonight. We're getting information tonight on the proposed ordinance. And you've gone to a great deal of effort, which is much appreciated, to do an analysis on our code.
We're talking about parking only parking. That's all I've talked about. Then that's the example I know. I don't know.
No,
I know you have two more on Adams Street. You have 2 more things coming up real quick. I don't know any situation. I don't know the specifics on that. I know specific on this one though. Anyway, I apologize.
No, don't apologize. I'm just trying to keep myself out of trouble here. Mr. Patterson.
Well, I more than appreciate that.
I think you've made, I appreciate your testimony. You have the side-by-side comparison, the council can absorb. The council, it's not lost on the council that we have challenges that we're trying to address with parking. And you brought a perspective, and I know this council, they will look through this material and we will have an opportunity to discuss it when we get to our 3rd reading, but we're not making a decision on the parking code tonight, other than to read it to continue the process toward an end.
This is my time to do my quacking, this is a quacking time, right? I can't quack next time, I don't think.
Well,
Anyway, up on the screen now, you have to ask on the parking, what motivation, who's being motivated by what? Is a normal citizen trying to get double decker parking? Or is that someone who's trying to save some monies in their pocket? Who is making the big push? Garden City citizens are massively unhappy about the parking everywhere. In Boise, they're really unhappy about it. That's in the news all the time. The poor guy who lives here pays every day, and the investors move on and the inks move out. Who do you listen to? Who do you trust? This is your legacy. This isn't my legacy. This is your legacy. Let's get it right. For the Garden City citizens, for your grandkids, for all the kids, including me. I'm a young kid nowadays. I'm growing backwards. Whoa. I'm not doing very good on this thing, huh? Go back one more. World class, that's what we want to be. Functionality is the secret. Functionality is the key. It's got to work. If it doesn't work, it's no good. Got to work. Beauty, kindness, compassion, empathy, that's a human trait, it's a soul trait. Grace, that's a God-given trait. We should all give grace to people. Love, do this for all the right reasons. Don't make a mistake and pour it in concrete and wish 10 years from now, oh, we shouldn't have done that. Let's get the numbers right. This is forever.
Need you to wrap it up, Mr. Patterson.
I am done.
Perfect. Okay. So, thank you very much. I don't see any, Lisa, I can't see if we have anybody else online that's going to testify.
Jason.
Jason. Yeah. We can have Jason replacing himself.
Okay, Mr. Jones, floor is yours.
Let me get started here. Hey, Jason Jones, 208 East 33rd Street, Garden City, Idaho. I already testified once, but I kind of want to add to what I previously kind of pointed out because the code's actually changed since I testified. So they've been kind of modifying as they go. I want to first kind of respond to some of the comments tonight. I guess I'm one of the 70% of SUV drivers. I have a Jeep Grand Cherokee. And to give you just a little bit of perspective, my Jeep is 6.5 feet wide, 16 feet 2 inches long. So the parking code would work for SUVs. I mean, it's like I said, you're basically 4 feet longer than an SUV and 3.5 feet wider in the current standards. I also want to point out that once again, these are parking minimums. There's nothing that would prevent a private property owner from building a 23-foot long space if you want to accommodate an oversized truck. And so again, these are the minimums. So as we kind of talk about that, I mean, the spaces don't have to fit an army tank. So they can fit average vehicles. And I think that's kind of the key. I also want to point out, because I think it should be said, you know, lots of people have been testifying in relation to other developments. The development at the golf course is going to be an SAP. It's a specific area plan. So they're going to propose their own parking independent of whatever code is adopted by the city council. And so I think that this code, lots of people think that if the city council adopts this parking code, that somehow that applies to that specific area plan, but they're going to propose their own parking. It's totally separate. It has nothing to do with it. And so I think it's kind of interesting that people are fighting this parking code, thinking that has something to do with that development, but it really doesn't, because they are going to propose their own parking. They're going to be able to modify that parking throughout the process, and it's going to have nothing to do with the city code. They're going to be able to propose whatever they want. I want to hit on a few other things, because even as I listen, I think the big thing that I hear from every single person who testifies is that most of the problems they have with parking are related to how the city handles on-street parking. And again, that's something I think the city could look at right now and start to look at, so that, you know, because that really is the issue, is how do we handle this socialized on-street parking that we have? And quite frankly, you know, forcing private property owners to do parking a certain way doesn't make sense when the city isn't even regulating their own parking. So it's an easy thing to do to regulate private property rights. But the city should probably regulate the socialized parking that they already own and control. And I know that would involve ACHD, but I think those are discussions that should probably start now. If you think there's going to be parking problems in the future with on-street parking. So hopefully that's something the city will start to look at, because I do think that's a big push. I think the other real big reason that I'm talking now is
Try to wrap it up here pretty quick.
okay. I mean, I think the reason I'm here is that parking is one of the most expensive regulations that the city forces on private property owners. So when you think about regulations, this is the most expensive one. I think that's why so many people care about it, especially people doing development. In terms of the code as it is right now, I wouldn't say I'm a supporter of the code. I mean, I think that Jenna's done a pretty good job at presenting a whole variety of things to the city council to look at. I think there's still some danger in having specific regulations. When I looked at, like, for example, Western Collective is a great example. If this code were to pass, they would have to have more than twice as many parking spaces as they currently have. And I think the bad part about that is that their business just wouldn't exist if they had to have twice as much parking. And I think that we're going to basically regulate away a lot of business without even knowing it, because they just can't meet those parking requirements. So it's a really dangerous thing. You know, the businesses we have will be able to stay around because they don't have to get forced into it, but we might not get the next Western Collective, or the next winery might not be able to open, because these parking regulations, they're arbitrary. We're just picking some numbers and hoping it works. And so if we do adopt this parking code, I do hope the city council will kind of keep an eye on those numbers and see where they can be reduced. I know at one point there was code that might allow.
Mr. Jones,
Yep.
thank you.
Hey, thank you.
I'll give you an extra couple of minutes. So
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Thank you. You betcha.
Have a good one.
I'm reading this. Hannibal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Are we given addresses for the record?
Please say again.
Are we giving addresses for the record anymore?
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay, sorry.
This is the public hearing. This will be added to the record. We have on the agenda the second reading of the ordinance tonight. There will be an opportunity for the council to come back for the third reading and make any final revisions they choose.
Gotcha. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Hannibal, 215 East 34th Street, Garden City, Idaho. And I just wanted to, again, through the lens of looking at the east end of Garden City, not Plantation, not some of the other neighborhoods, but just analyzing this code specifically from Glenwood East. I do believe Glenwood East is an urban area. We have high density and we have unlimited height, and we have large buildings already going in, already approved. So I think that the character of the neighborhood is already urban in nature, and we will continue with that urban pattern. So I think the way that this parking reads, it doesn't allow for, like Jason said, a lot of new businesses to come in. It's pretty difficult with the size of the lots of the East End. We've applied it, and I've heard, and I understand the tone council has taken in that they might look at some formulas for the East End, but I've heard the comments, well, maybe we look at something, or maybe we give an exception, or maybe we look at something a little different from the East End. I think we should start that conversation sooner than later. And again, it's like we can't be making arbitrary reactions after the fact as development starts coming in. I think that's what puts a lot of pressure on council and some of the other bodies. So I would just really suggest at least an initial stab at an overlay, or how that component of the East End could function a little bit different, what that means, and how we could just try something. It could be a pilot program, or even certain streets where we really start some exercises to see how that could function. So thank you, guys. I know this has been a lot of work, and I appreciate everybody's efforts in it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'll point out to everybody that in the draft parking regulation, we have a parking district component, which allows the city to take a look in a more surgical manner of specific areas of town that might need or might not fit the standard code. It's in the draft. I'd encourage everybody to look at it. It would allow for different restrictions, different increases in parking, decreases in parking. And it's designed to allow the city to be more surgical in their approach to a specific parking circumstance in a particular district in town, specific area in town. It's kind of a recognition that one size doesn't always fit all, and that I'm not sure there's a perfect code. So it's something that I think is important that's in this draft that we're looking at. Is there anyone else to testify? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Again, council, the decision you're making tonight is simply to read this ordinance for the second reading. And then when we come back in 2 weeks, you'll have an opportunity to deliberate, make any changes you think are necessary, and we'll go from there. So I'm looking for a motion to have the second reading by title only.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I move for a second reading of ordinance 1034-22 by title only.
Do I have a second?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes. I need a second if you want to discuss. You don't have to pass the motion, but
I'll
go-
second.
Okay, got a motion and a second. Now discussion.
Mr.
Councilmember Jorgensen, yes.
I apologize for this, but I want to ensure that I understand the process.
Okay,
So this evening we do the second reading, and then in theory, at the next council meeting, the council will be allowed to deliberate and ask clarifying questions, because in reading the packet, I had a lot of questions coming out of the legal memo, and I wasn't
Okay.
sure if that was reviewed last council meeting or if we will be stepping through that subsequently.
well, you can ask questions anytime. That's prerogative of the city council. The purpose tonight was to hear from the public and take public input on the ordinance, which we've done. And my recommendation is, if you have questions on the current code, I don't see any harm. We're in the deliberation on a motion right now. And if part of your decision on acting on that motion requires a conversation with staff, I'll allow it. So Jenna, would you come up?
Mayor, Councilmember Jorgensen, I stand for questions.
Ms. Thornborough, I will reserve most of my questions for the next time we meet. However, I did want to ensure I understood comments regarding the information sent by Ms. Butler. On, I believe it's the fourth bullet down. You believe, if I understood you correctly, that comment was an error, because in fact, the request is half parking guest space.
Mayor, Councilmember Jorgensen, yes, I believe that right now as drafted, it's one covered space per unit plus additional guest parking that's required for bicycle parking.
Thank you. If I may, Mr.
Sure.
Another question regarding transit lines. Do we have termination spots in Garden City?
Mayor, Council Member Jorgensen, yes, so the 9X does run down State Street. That is what I believe that this comment is referring to. And that route does run down State Street, which State Street in and of itself is technically in Boise, but it does serve Garden City and that it's adjacent. And there is a terminus at Saxton, which is the stoplight at Walmart for that line currently.
And you may know this, are there other stops along State Street within Garden City? Just if it's easily recalled.
Mayor, Councilmember Jorgensen, not along, so there are stops along State Street until you get to that Saxton point. So the answer is yes.
Thank you. That's
Thank you.
the extent for my questions this evening.
No, you're more than welcome.
Mayor.
Any further discussion?
Mr. Mayor, just help clarify, but down the heart of Garden City on Chinden Boulevard, what's the transportation there? Since State Street really isn't in Boise, what's the transportation corridor down Chinden, which is all Garden City? Are there any stops?
Mayor, Councilmember Jacobs, the answer is yes. I don't remember the line. There is a Chinden. It does go through. I think there's 1 or 2 stops on that line. And I don't remember the exact number. There's another one that runs down Glenwood. The one that we've heard a lot of discussion about was the 11, and that's the one that was removed off of Adams Street.
So nothing on that.
Correct.
Not Adams, there's the Fred Meyer stop.
Right.
There's a stop right out here at Marigold on Glenwood.
And then one other question, it's my recollection that the 1/4 mile requirement was scratched, and it's a 300-foot requirement, correct?
Mayor, Councilmember Jacobs, that's correct. The current code that we have in effect, Garden City has in effect right now, allows for 300 feet. And then the current draft did revert back to that 300 feet. All parking in this current draft is required to be on site unless the 846 alternatives for on-street parking is approved. And within that, if there's an equivalent for on-street parking approved, residential needs to be within 300 feet.
I wanted to clarify that because under public testimony, you mentioned a 1/4 mile, and it's 300 feet is the code, not 40.
Mayor, Councilmember Jacobs, that's correct for residential. And then staff might suggest, just as a point of order, since the next meeting is the 3rd reading, if council knows ahead of time any direction that they'd like to see tonight, any specific changes in code, either via testimony or if they can concur with kind of the list that staff read out during the staff's presentation. That way those could be ready for the 3rd reading. Not to negate that you might have some time to review some of the materials and request additional changes at the next meeting. But if you do have some tonight that you'd like to see in their draft format for the next meeting, that might be helpful.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Ms. Thornborough, to answer that question, I took some notes here. Speaking for myself and myself only, I would want to see language that empowers the clerk's office to administer permitting. And that would also exempt city vehicles from permits. I think it's a great idea to define and designate loading zones and loading zone hours. Especially loading zone hours. speaking for myself, I'm okay with removing restrictions for tandem parking in residential, but strictly in residential. And can you speak again to the clarification of A4D?
Mayor, Council President Page, I'm sorry, 84D.
I was writing as fast as you were talking.
So let me look through my notes.
It was right after you were talking about tandem parking in residential, and then this 84D, you wanted something to clarify intent of that.
The 84D8 is related to permit restrictions, and there's two sections that are not very understandable if you read them in their current draft. And those sections are
the table, page
with
152.
they are under 3D.
Oh, 3D.
So 84D8. Excuse me, C3D. Permit restrictions. And if their staff feels that they're very confusing how they're drafted and maybe miss the intent, and they could be reworded to just note, and I do have proposed language, that the maximum number of permits that are available within the parking district shall be identified. But that's in subtext up above. And the areas where the permit parking is prohibited in order to preserve the public's access to areas of activity and public amenities might be clearer wording for the council to consider than is in the current draft.
Okay, I would put a pin in that. Garden City Code 154 empowers chief of police to issue parking violations or chief's designee. I think that's going to be critical as we move forward, especially if we're going to need subject matter experts if we do designate parking districts. I see a potential for confusion. What's allowed in the district where I live, and then I drive to a Saturday market, what's allowed in that district. So I think, I don't really know. Everybody says don't post a sign because nobody reads them anyway, but really, how do we educate longtime residents of Garden City that what's legal 4 blocks away is no longer legal, or what's legal in my neighborhood, how I'm used to parking, it might be illegal in a different part of the city. So I do like the idea of having the police, the ability to designate how they intend to enforce that with experts in those areas. And that's those were my notes.
Thank you, Mayor and Council President.
Other members of the council agree or disagree with that as far as direction?
Mr. Mayor, I agree. And President of the Council, I believe Ms. Thornborough led with a discussion regarding where to place the language regarding tandem parking. And I was in agreement with that. And I also captured, I do believe that it would be helpful to provide some definition and clarity around the lighting requirements. So as not to confuse people into a belief that we're overburdening requirements.
Okay. Anything else? We're in the discussion on the motion for the second reading. Just to clarify with some of the furrowed brows I'm seeing in the audience, we've been talking about a section that it would empower the city to create a district. It's not creating a district. It's not creating a permit parking. It's just allowing the city to consider that if conditions in the future warrant. So I don't want to confuse that with the minimum parking standards that are in the rest of the code. Is there any more discussion? Okay, I've got a motion on the floor to read ordinance 1034-22 by title only. Clerk, call the roll.
Councilmember Jacobs,
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Yes.
Councilmember Page,
Yes.
Councilmember Heller.
Yes.
Second reading ordinance 1034-22, an ordinance of the city of Garden City, a municipal corporation of the state of Idaho, amending or repealing Garden City Code Title 5, Traffic, Chapter 1, Traffic Code, Section 4, Stopping, Standing, or Parking, Chapter 9, Permits, Title 8, Development Code, Chapter 1, General Regulations, Article C, Property Maintenance Provisions, Section 3, Property Maintenance Standards, Chapter 2, Base Zoning Districts Regulations, Article B, Base Zoning District Provisions, Section 2, Allowed Uses, repealing Chapter 3, Overlay Zoning District Regulations, Article D, Neighborhood Commercial Node, Section 3, General Provisions, subsection C, Parking, amending Chapter 4, Design and Development Regulations, Article D, Parking and Off-Street Loading Provisions, Section 1, Purpose, Section 2, Applicability, Section 3, Parking Design and Improvement Standards, Section 4, Parking Use Standards, Section 5, Required Number of Off-Street Parking Spaces, Section 6, Standards for Alternatives to On-Site Parking, Section 7, Off-Street Loading Standards, adding Section 8, Parking District, amending Chapter 6, Administration, Article B, Specific Definite Provisions, Section 8, Minor Planned Unit Development, Subsection D, General Provisions for the Site Layout Template, and amending Chapter 7, References, Article A, Definitions, Section 2, Definition of Terms, repealing all ordinances or part thereof to the extent they conflict with this ordinance, providing all other ordinances, including the official code, are still in effect, notwithstanding some provisions thereof being eliminated, repealing any other ordinance creating or regulating parking, providing for severability, approving a summary of the ordinance, and providing an effective date.
Thank you. That's it on the parking for tonight. Next item, item 2.3, would authorize me to enter into an agreement with Custom Electric to buy a backup generator and for the sum of $98,000. As the packet indicated, this item was budgeted when we approved the 2023 budget. However, because of the size of the expenditure, I wanted to make sure the council was reminded of that and could answer any questions if the information in the packet needs clarification. And Mr. Smith is available for any questions. I'll ask one. How many of these generators do we have around?
Mayor Evans, at this point, we have
For the
5 different well sites that are on diesel backup generators.
okay,
4 wellheads, and then our reservoir system also has one.
okay.
Yeah.
So it's just the water we drink.
In case of emergency, buy $98,000.
Yes. Yes. There are no questions for Mr. Schmidt. I'd entertain an action.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I move to authorize you as the mayor to enter into an agreement with Custom Electric for the purchase of a generator for an amount not to exceed $98,000.
Got a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I just would like to, in the discussion, could we just clarify that that's enterprise fund money? And I see that in the memo, but I just wanted to say that
Sure.
from the dais.
Okay.
And so that's understood.
Let the record reflect that the $98,000 is in our utility account enterprise fund. Will not be paid through taxes. Okay, any further discussion? Okay, clerk call the roll.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Yes.
Councilmember Page,
Yes.
Councilmember Heller,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacobs.
Yes.
Great, thank you. That concludes the business on our agenda this evening. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
Got a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We stand adjourned. I have baseball cap.